What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. It is time for another weekly reading wrap up, and we do have a couple of weeks to cover because those of you who noticed that I did not upload last week, I do apologize. I unfortunately caught the latest strain of the Rona going around, and it just completely knocked me off my feet. I was literally in bed from Monday afternoon 2 p.m. until Friday evening. It was awful. I would not recommend it to anyone, and I'll probably still sound a little funny. I do apologize for that. I will edit out any sniffling, sneezing, coughing so that we can have an enjoyable time here today catching up on the last couple of weeks. Before we jump into discussing all of the things that I read, I do like to show off any new book beauties that are joining the Nerdy Narrative Library, and I do have one. It is Zora Neale Hurston's A Life in Letters, and I am thrilled. When this came in the mail, it actually came yesterday. This is from my friend Evie from the channel. She was only Evie. I knew as soon as I pulled it out, even if the gift receipts had not been included, I would have known immediately who it was from. Evie has been funding my Zora Neale Hurston obsession for years now. This just came at the most perfect timing. I wish I could smell it. My sense of smell still has not fully returned yet. It is slowly coming back. I would much rather have my sense of taste back than my sense of smell first. As I was saying, it came at the perfect time. I have one more short story collection that is up for review, and then I can get back to the ones that I have sitting on my shelf waiting to be finished. One of those is the essays, the nonfiction essays of Zora Neale Hurston, and I'm going to intersperse those with these letters. I just cannot wait. I see there are all kinds of letters in here. There are pictures included. This is going to be an absolute delightful read. So now we can get into all of the books that I finished over the last couple of weeks. But first, we drink coffee so we don't cough. Okay, the first thing that I finished is the novella from the self-titled collection, If It Bleeds. I've been working on all of the Holly Gibney stories and books, getting ready for the new release by Stephen King, Holly. I finished that novella, and I have to agree with my friend Jake, the bookish drummer. If you haven't seen his review of Holly, I will have that linked in the description box down below. But I have to agree with Jake. This novella is my favorite Holly Gibney story. That is not to say I do not love and adore the rest, because they are important. Where we meet Holly Gibney in the novel Mr. Mercedes, that begins her arc, and her arc spans over all of these stories, and this is the one where she has just really fully realized and come into her own, and it's so good. It's so good. It was a reread for me. I loved it the first time I read it, which is hilariously where I first met the character of Holly Gibney. And even though the novella completely spoils all of her other books, I still read and loved all of those as well. So we will segue right into Holly, which I did finish. It was a good book. It just had some issues. There were some things that I wish had been done better, which if you're a Stephen King constant reader, you can probably guess exactly what those are. And that is his insertion of his political views, which he just runs absolutely rampant with in this book. If you have found those annoying in the past and you thought they were just getting worse and worse, and you're like, I can't take any more of that, don't even try with this one. You're not going to be able to make it through. I got to where I was skimming that. While it did make sense for when this story took place, because it does take place during the time of the pandemic and right after, it made sense to have it in. It just didn't make sense to have it in so much and have every single character ask, are you vaccinated? Are you double vaxxed? Which one do you have? It was just beating the reader over the head with it. Even though I myself took these precautions, I agree with these precautions, and in some cases I even took the precautions a little further than these characters, I was freaking annoyed by how much of the story it took up. There was also some incorrect information included, but hey, I guess he gets away with it because it is fiction. It would not be a current Stephen King release without his hatred of Donald Trump, although he has really taken it so far that I think he actually does more good for Donald Trump and the Republicans than he does to detract from it. It's all in the manner of how you do it. If you want to have a conversation with someone and share your beliefs and opinions and attempt to have them see your way of view and perhaps see the reason behind it and understand where you're coming from, Doing it in the manner of Stephen King is the #1 way to make people not want to agree with you, not want to listen to you. At any rate, if you pare out all of the political rants, all of the time spent on masking and all of this stuff, if you get to the core story, I did really enjoy it. I wanted more focus on that. A desperate mother calls finders keepers and hires Holly to find her daughter. She's not pleased with the lack of progress from the police department. You know, this does take place in the early days following the lockdown. It's so fresh. We can all remember how busy all of the government agencies, law enforcement, were with just everything surrounding this. So the mother hires Holly to see if she can't have a little more success in locating her daughter who disappeared. Holly takes the case, she begins her investigation, she uncovers a whole lot of questionable disappearances over the years, and it just leads to places that you're gonna be shocked. I was shocked. And in Stephen King fashion, he does reveal who the villains are and what they're doing, and I was not expecting it. I know a lot of people from reading reviews were disappointed because there was no supernatural element to it. As a true crime junkie, I was perfectly happy with the crime thriller that we got in this one. Will I ever reread it? No. As much as I love Holly Gibney, I like her story arcs and all of the other novels much more. I will reread those and love those. I'm going to pretend this one didn't exist because I feel Stephen King got a little bit away from Holly's character. To me, there were a lot of things that Holly did in the latter part of this book that I just don't feel line up with the trajectory of her character development and growth. I just don't see Holly being able to do some of those things. So I don't know if you agree with me or not. Let me know in the comments below if you've read this. Before you go getting into spoilers, make sure you type spoilers and then hit enter a few times so that hides your comment from anyone who may be down there that hasn't read this one yet that is expecting to. There you go. Those are my thoughts on Holly by Stephen King, and lesson learned. I know I've said this before, I'm going to quit buying Stephen King when a book is a new release. I'm absolutely sticking to that going forward because that is not a book I would have purchased if I had just read it first. I just didn't think he would do that to a Holly Gibney book. I was wrong. He does it in every freaking one of his books. I'm just over it. I'm gonna let other people pick them up in the future, read some initial reviews and see, because there's a lot of people that's like, too much political ranting, too much political, too political. Let's move on from that. The next book that I finished reading was the arc for the Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. The expected publication for this one is September 26th, and my goodness, you all, if you haven't pre-ordered your copy of this one, you're going to want to have it. I just absolutely loved it. I finished it last night. I hope to have my written review up by the time that this video goes live. I haven't had a chance to write it yet, but my gosh, it was such a delightful book. The way that I pictured it as I was reading it, the way that it felt, each chapter could be its own TV show. This book absolutely needs to be adapted to a TV series because each chapter was its own adventure and all of it ties in together. All of the chapters connect and move the story forward, but it just felt like each one had a unique experience, whether it be introduction to a new character or a new type of magical creature, the magic system being introduced, all the different types of magic, the different types of casters, even the history of these people, the nobility. It was fascinating. Now, I will say the first chapter was a bit of an overload as far as the way that he chose to introduce the characters and just give all of these big lengthy descriptions. It was a bit of an overload for me. Luckily, it was only 3 characters, but it just kind of was a lot at first, but I only felt that way about the first chapter. The rest of it flowed at a pace that was easier for me to just learn what was going on. And something helpful that is included in this one that I want you to be aware of for those of you who haven't gotten your copy yet, there's a glossary, there's a list of people, there's also a description of all of the different hexes that you can refer back to, because this is the heart of the story. They're called the Hexologists. It's a husband and wife team of investigators, Iz and Warren Wilby, and they have been hired by the royal secretary to discover the identity of someone who had written a letter claiming to be the bastard son of the king, who is currently ill. This guy, for some reason, has decided he wants to be baked in an oven. To be more concise, he wants to be baked in a cake. And that is the one thing that is revealed in chapter 1 that caught my curiosity and made me want to keep reading to learn more about why does this king want to be baked in a cake. He has been actively caught trying to get into an oven. While my interest in the story initially began with wanting the answer to that question, it quickly evolved into my love of the main characters, Iz and Warren Wilby. They are just an absolute delight. I never thought I would love reading about a married couple main character set, but these two are just absolutely phenomenal. There's humor, there is genuine love and affection for one another, and what that could mean for working together as a pair. Your partner is your spouse. If you see them in danger, are you going to do what you need to be doing, or are you going to go help your spouse out, which could cause its own mess of problems? And I really enjoyed seeing how Josiah Bancroft addressed those. The magic system I found to be equally fun to learn about and also see just the dark side of it. The different types of monsters and fantastical creatures. I mean, Iz and Warren have a guard dragon. Oh my gosh, I love Vox. He was an absolute delight to have into this story, a wonderful addition. He probably was just meant to be a side character, but he steals the show anytime he appeared on the page, and I want more of him. Josiah Bancroft's creativity knew no bounds. I was constantly just delighted with what he was creating on these pages. One of those is in the very beginning, we learned that this couple has this bag, which is described like as a carpet bag, and inside of it, it's just this portal. They keep their magical collection of objects inside of there, which is where the dragon resides. It's just this fantastic fantasy mystery. I know those are new on the scene. I hope that continues to be a thing. I have read so many of those recently and just absolutely adored each and every one. I am on board with these fantasy mysteries. So if you love Josiah Bancroft, but you're not sure what you think about a fantasy mystery, but you know you're going to read this one, you're going to love it. And if you do love it, you should check out Over London by Tony Johnson and George Penney, and If Light Above by Lily Ann Crow. Those are two other fantasy mysteries that I've read recently. One is a comedy and one is more in vein with the Hexologist. I just cannot recommend those enough. Those are the 3 things that I managed to finish over the last couple of weeks. I am still working on a couple of things. I have pre-approved for Haunting by Patrick Barb. This one comes out, let me find my note card here, also on September 26th, so very soon. I am adoring this collection. I knew I would. I've read Patrick Barb before. I just really enjoy his writing. I would kind of throw him into the speculative horror classification. It makes you think. I think I have 2 stories left and I'll be finished with this one. I cannot recommend it enough. It is fantastic. If you're looking for something to read during October, just a little something. If you're somebody that doesn't like to read a lot of horror, or you just want to kind of dip your toes into it to see if it's a genre you might want to pick up and start reading, I would recommend this collection. You just cannot go wrong with Patrick Barb, in my opinion. I did start the audiobook 80/20 Running by Matt Fitzgerald, and I think I made it through half an hour and I DNF'd it. It's a short book. I think it's only 5 hours long. I couldn't make it. He did not make it interesting. It was just all facts, statistics, and studies. Just taking too long to get to the point. He was just giving all of this factual information as to why he got into 80/20 running. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who get into that, maybe running coaches do, but as someone who is a runner just wanting to understand the training plan that they're doing a little better, it still has to be something that's interesting and engaging. So I DNF'd it. Once I DNF'd that one, it opened the door to start something else, which I picked Winter's Heart by Robert Jordan. I'm a little ways in. I'm about 12-13% of the way in, and let me stop and say that again. I'm about 12 or 13% of the way in. That is 100% all of the prologue. It's really hilarious how long this man's prologues are. This far into the story, I don't even know why he's calling them prologues, because you're just going from one book to another. Why are we talking about something that happened right before something else that happened right after the previous book? I don't know. I just think it's silly. But this is book 9 of the Wheel of Time series. We're just chugging right along with that one. I'm glad that I took a couple of weeks, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks off from the series to get back into it, because it is not a fun series to binge back to back. This is not one if you're somebody who starts a series and they just read that series until they're done. This is not one of those to do that with. I would recommend taking like 3 to 4 months between if I were you, because he just repeats himself so much that he's going to refresh your memory, and I think that would keep you from getting annoyed with it. This is one that I had forgotten some of the things that happened in it. Well, I'd pretty much forgotten what happened in this one, but as soon as I got into the meat of the prologue and something happened, it immediately sparked some memories of things that are going to happen in this one. I'm excited for it. I think this one is going to end up higher on the list of my favorite books in the Wheel of Time series once I finish it up. Those are the only 2 things I am currently reading, so let's talk about what I'm going to read next. Since I only have 2 short stories left in the Patrick Barb collection, that means I will get a chance to start a new short story collection. This one is called The Vengeful Dead by John James Minster. This is the author that wrote The Undertaker's Daughter that I read and absolutely loved recently. It was one of those dark horse books. I sat down, I was just gonna read a chapter or 2, get started on it one night, and suddenly I was 100 pages in, which is unusual for me. I'm one of those that I fidget and I might read 2 or 3 chapters and I get up and do something and I'll come back to it, but I sat in my chair unmoving and read 100 pages straight. Just could not put this one down or let it go, and I think I ended up reading it in a couple of days. Just really enjoyed that book. I wanted more, and fortunately for me, the author saw that or heard me say it in a video and emailed me the short story collection, so I'm going to be reading that one next. The next book that I'm going to read is called Let Him In by William Friend. I requested and was approved for the ARC on NetGalley for this one. It looks like a horror story. I'm very excited to read this one. It has a deadline, so that's my next read. That one's a relatively short one. I believe it's under 300 pages, so I think I'll be able to squeeze one more in before I talk to y'all next week. So I'm going to be reading and reviewing 12 Blades in Contempt by Jordan Darrett. My friend Kate from the Literary Apothecary had him on her channel. She read this book and really enjoyed it. I'll link their discussion video down in the description below if you want to check that out. I want to say, I may be wrong because I'm just completely talking out my tail right here. I think this one is an Asian inspired fantasy, which I am a huge fan of Asian inspired fantasy. That's just one of those niches that I just love, and I have no idea why. I mean, I have no reason that I can give to you. It's just something I enjoy. It may be because there's generally some type of focus, meditation, martial arts, or swordplay involved, and I've just always gravitated toward that type of thing that I've enjoyed either reading about or watching. Knowing going into a book that I'm going to enjoy it just makes me even more excited. And then I will get to my nonfiction essay by Joe Didion for this month, which is called Many Mansions, which I am guessing is going to be about some different big ass houses in California back in the late 60s and early 70s. So I'll be picking up that one and reading it too. That is it. All of the things that I have read, am reading, and going to read next. Y'all let me know how y'all are doing out there. I hope you all are staying safe. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm so glad you were here to spend a little time with me today. Have a great rest of your day, a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch you in the next one.